Hi there, Lillian here. If you know someone who seems like their marriage is highly conflicted, you can feel that something's off, but you can't come right out and say it. If you have that kind of intimate relationship with her, and if the opportunity provides a space for it, please forward any of my videos to her. Those of us stuck in this kind of Stockholm syndrome, we're easily blinded by masculine attention, and we can't tell the difference between abuse and love. The reason I've started this channel is to wake up broken feminine hearts. I hope that by sharing my journey of how our God transformed me from abused and broken to a healed and strong daughter might trigger common abuse for another victim that's trapped. The knowledge that she gets from my story might be just one of the steps God uses on her healing journey. There's two possible outcomes with this knowledge. She'll heal and be able to bring that feminine heart into her marriage, making her marriage stronger and smoothing out unnecessary conflicts, causing division between her and her man. Or the second outcome is the awakening that she's actually married to a wolf in sheep's clothing instead of a difficult man. She'll be able to begin to heal, and organically take back her personhood from the predator that has trapped her in her own house. Waking up to this reality will increase her confidence in our God and her self-esteem that's rooted in His love. As she takes more and more responsibility for her healing, her boundaries will begin so that she can safely gray rock the covert narcissist out. Today I'm going to talk about creating some distance between you and your husband so that you can see better. By stepping back, you diffuse your feelings and you center your emotions. This positioning creates space for the man to reveal the truth about himself, his real fruit. Whenever there's a conflict of any kind in your marriage, stepping back is always the best maneuver for a woman. God has given femininity the ability to emotionally unhook, but it doesn't do any good for either of us, the husband or the wife, if we don't understand it and we haven't been taught how to embody it appropriately. In Ecclesiastes, God says, "To everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to tear down and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak." This really neat thing started to happen when my femininity began to heal. My gullibility and naivety began to dissolve, and a shrewdness that I had never experienced started to develop. It was in this shrewdness that God showed me that I hadn't learned a key element in relationships, that there's a time for tearing and being silent, and then there's a time for coming back together and talking. All the Christian marriage material I read said communication is the most important thing. So that's what I did. But it is wrong. So wrong. Well, as I usually say, not wrong, just woefully and dangerously incomplete. Knowing how and when not to communicate is just as important, maybe even more important, than knowing when and how to communicate. I was never taught how not to communicate. A wolf will reveal himself in one of two ways. The first one is a religious mindset. It twists God's word to ignore the masculine and feminine polarity in attraction. You want to know if you've been infected with a religious mindset? When I said the word attraction, your knee jerked. I'm not talking about the law of attraction. I'm talking about the fact that God created the masculine to be drawn to the feminine and vice versa. Girls like boys and boys like girls. The word attraction captures this. So the religious mindset denies this reality of equal attraction that happens in relationship, and it focuses only on the masculine mindset. The relationship for a woman is lived only through the role of the duties of a wife. There's no relationship between testosterone and estrogen, just the role of doing, which is masculine. There's no space for the femininity that was created to receive in relationship, only intercourse. Her purpose for being female is reproduction. The second way a wolf, or the other way a wolf would reveal himself, is that he will accept that there's a relationship between a man and a woman that's different than just dutiful roles of husband and wife, like what you'd see in a religious mindset. But the headship in this mindset is antithetical to Christ's example as the head of the church. This headship is called headship, but is actually lived out through dominance. He calls it headship, but he embodies dominance because femininity is seen as inferior to masculinity. In the heat of a conflict, stepping back merely allows your husband to be himself, his truest self. It might sound like a game or a manipulation, but it's not. There's a time to step back, to tear some space between the two of you and be silent. The nature of femininity is to receive and respond. In order to receive forward trajectory or motion from your man, there needs to be a space for him to express that motion. If you're constantly stepping into the space by overfunctioning or trying to talk about and solve the problems, you're doing it for him. This clouds your ability to feel, so you cannot see. It becomes an unfair guessing game or a manipulation when you do not accept him the way that he is or what he has to offer. When you've got an expectation for him to be a certain way or do a certain thing, a way you want him to be, you're focusing on the outcome of his behaviors instead of accepting who he is. I think, and I'm totally speculating here through the hindsight of 2020 vision, but if I had been able to accept who my ex-husband was, instead of trying to change him and how he was with me, he would have exposed his own rotten fruit way sooner. I know it sounds like I'm saying to accept the abuse of a covert narcissist. I'm not. I'm saying you've got to accept the reality of who and what he is. If he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, accept that knowledge as truth. Creating this space between you and him, this distance that you create through tearing back and your silence, is how you actually avoid absorbing the abuse. There's a big difference in the response of a difficult but not dangerous husband. This kind of man is going to step into that space between you. He wants to exercise masculine cleaving. You'll feel the fruit of relationship exchange. He will be seen and known by you. An unhealthy man does not want to be seen in his vulnerability, nor does he want his fruit seen, because he knows it's rotten. The dangerous man will aggress into this space you've created in order to bully you. You won't feel good fruit. You'll feel a push and a pull simultaneously. It's unclear and non-directional. He's not cleaving to you as an equal. He's trying to crush your femininity by dominating it through works disguised as fruit. This is why it feels confusing. Emotionally unhooking your femininity from the situation means to settle back and allow it. It's intentional and decisive self-control, the opposite of reactive. It's a boundary. A dangerous man hates boundaries. It stops his domination of you just for a minute. He cannot own or control you in that time frame. He loses control. A boundary is the embodiment of the Hina principle. Your boundary says, yes, I will accept that coming towards me, or no, I won't. A wolf, whether he's religious or a relational one, wants you to believe You have no say because of your femininity. That in Ephesians 5:33, you are commanded to respect his rotten fruit instead of exposing it or training. He wants you to believe that God did not give you the responsibility to govern and guard your own heart. I want to take a little detour here. I'll pick up the conclusion in part 4 of the series, but I want to clarify what I mean whenever I say train a man instead of teach him. First of all, anytime you're in a relationship with anyone, you're training them how to be with you, just like they're training you how to be with them. It's that simple, but not that easy or natural for us. In Titus 2, older women are told to teach what is good so that they may encourage the young wives to love their husbands and to love their children. God points out 2 obvious things that we need to get a hold of. We need to be taught how to love and how to love the right way with the right people. We get embarrassed. I know I got embarrassed when I first realized that I did not know how to love properly. And by the way, that also means we don't know how to love ourselves properly either. That's not part of this video, but it is something to think about. We've got to start seeing the truth in ourselves instead of thinking that we should know how to do something before we're taught it. Paul tells us in Philippians that it's a learning process. That's why he says he's praying for them. He says, so this is my prayer, that your love will flourish and that you will not only love much, but well. Learn to love appropriately. You need to use your head and test your feelings so that your love is sincere and intelligent, not sentimental gush. I didn't know the difference, and this can make a marriage difficult. But for those of us married to covert narcissists, love that sentimental gush, well, that was deadly. It made me gullible and naive. So not knowing how to appropriately love your husband and kids is something we need to be taught how to do. Notice God says, just do it. Teach them how to love their husbands and kids. But he doesn't say what it is or how it's good or why it's good. He just says to teach it. And in Philippians, he says it's the same way. Just do it. Love appropriately. But he doesn't exactly say what appropriate is. He says what it's not, but who's to decide what's sincere and intelligent instead of sentimental gush? In this case, he puts that onus to learn it and the obligation to teach it on the older women. We're the ones to teach younger wives how to love their husbands and how to love their children. God intentionally used 2 different words to wake us up and say, look, you relate completely different to a man than you do to a child. I know it sounds obvious, but remember, Paul said it's something that needs to be taught. And if it's something that needs to be taught, then logically, it's something that's unknown. And God says his people suffer because they don't know. He says they don't just lack knowledge, but truth and mercy. The instruction of that knowledge, truth, and mercy was the responsibility of the religious leaders. And to add to the confusion, in English, we only use one word for the love of everything and all things, but there's actually different kinds of love. C.S. Lewis has a great book on this called The 4 Loves. There's a couple of links for the audiobook in the description box. You love a child by teaching them about character development. A child already loves mom, but you train a man how to love you. Not instructing him how to develop his character. That's a mom's job. Peers train each other, men with men and women with women. But when the interplay in the relationship is male to female, that's completely different because you're adding two other dynamics that don't exist in friendship: romance and sex. So when I say train a man, I'm always alluding to that verse in Titus 2. The difference between how we live out that love. We teach kids by rules and instructions. Sometimes we coach and encourage them. Sometimes we make suggestions or warn. And sometimes criticism or correction or both is needed. But you can't do that with a man. It's emasculating to treat a man like a child. With a man, you make clear and concise requests. Healthy men, that is. A healthy man doesn't want you to teach him how to plan what you want or tell him how to execute what you want. He just wants your request. Training people is a demonstration of your boundaries. It's about knowing you and about you knowing them. You knowing you. You knowing how you want to be treated in a relationship with your husband. You knowing what you like and dislike in a relationship. You knowing how to request what you want in a way that your man can hear it and not be emasculated. Learning about the femininity that you embody, that's on you, not your husband. It's God who created you as a female. It's Him who created your estrogen-soaked brain and heart. All the feelings and emotions you possess are for you to manage. When I started to take responsibility for me and my emotions and my feelings and my thoughts and really understood my femininity, miraculous things started to change within me. It was the beginning of, the end of my naivety and my gullibility. An astute, discerning wife was emerging. I was so much more capable than I'd been conditioned to believe about myself over the past 34 years. A shrewd wife is way, way harder to manipulate. Closing thoughts. First, shh. Don't say a word about this to him. Discovering that your husband's dangerous is a scary place to end up. It's never where you thought you'd be, and it feels like an unreality. But your silence about your awareness of what he really is, that's your safety zone. And always remember, a clueless guy that causes dysfunction and seems difficult, he's not dangerous. But the malignant man is not clueless. He just pretends to be difficult and dysfunctional so that he can hide how dangerous he is.